All right, good evening, everyone. Give a minute or so to let everybody get in, and then we'll get started with our webinar tonight. Throughout the webinar, if you do have questions of things that come up, topics that we're covering, please use the chat box function there on the webinar, and we'll have a Q&A session there at the end that I'll try to answer specific questions related, or if it's something that is not covered and we don't have time, be glad to reach out and connect as always. So just take advantage of that chat box, and we'll cover it as we go there at the end in the Q&A section. All right, well, I'm going to get started now. So welcome, everybody. Appreciate you joining us, and great to have the interest in the session tonight. This is part of a series we're doing here through the winter to cover different topics. Brandy did parents' role in the recruiting process last week. I'm covering competitive pathway and ranking optimization this week. We're going to be back talking about some recruiting next week, and we'll have a couple more as well. So hopefully these are informative and helpful for the families here, and we're happy to do them. So I'm Mike Parker. I'm the tour director with the Peggy Kirk Bell Girls Golf Tour. Have been with the tour since its founding in 2007. Actually come from a baseball background, but have been in the industry since I got out of college, and been running tournaments for most of that, including the tour for the last 16 plus years. U.S. Kids World's site director and the local tour director, and previous to that. So I've had some different experiences in different parts of the industry, and enjoy now focusing completely on the girls' side as I have for the last decade and a half. The Peggy Kirk Bell Tour, for those who don't know a little bit about the tour itself, founded in 2007. It's an initiative of Girls Golf of America, which is a 501c3 nonprofit foundation. This organization was created out of, for lack of a better term, frustration that myself and a couple of the PGA pros who put together this foundation, Robert Linville, Chris Harlow, had with the opportunities for girls in the competitive space. And too often the opportunity was a boys tournament with the girls field. And our frustration with that is what led to create this tour. And we're so pleased to see how much it's resonated and grown over the years, to have 2,000 plus girls that participated last year. So we look forward to continuing to grow in this, and providing these resources to help these girls achieve their goals in the game. Tonight, we're going to cover some different pieces. First, we're going to start a little bit about the PKBGT, the way that it's structured, how your daughter would move through the pathway, the classifications. A lot of commonly asked questions we get about where your daughter fits in our program, because we do things a little differently, being that we don't do strictly age divisions. Second, kind of cover how the schedule is structured, a little explainer on the different tournaments, the way that the different divisions you can work through. Going to talk about priority-based entry, which is a big question we get about how do I get into different tournaments, how rankings are involved in this process, and how strength of tournament fields is involved. Kind of get into some explainer of how they're calculated, as well as some data to show you how tournaments are evaluated, and a little bit how coaches and others look at these tournaments as you're trying to evaluate what are good options for your child. Obviously, we cannot get to a deep dive on any of these topics, so I'm going to kind of stay pretty high level, but we'll hopefully do some more of these focused more on specific aspects. And as always, if you have questions, please do reach out and shoot me an email. I'll be glad to answer any specific questions later on. And then we'll have a little question and answer here at the end. All right, so let's get started. The Peggy Kirk Bell pathway is focused on a skill and yardage based progression. So as why we did not choose to do age divisions from the start is we wanted to provide a system that players could develop at their own pace. Very often you get a lot of girls that come to golf from team sports, maybe in middle or early high school, and they're, very athletic player that's looking to develop. And we didn't want a system that just threw that person into the deep end and said, sink or swim. We wanted to be able to have a system that could allow that player to develop. And what ultimately happens is it can happen very quickly because of their athletic background and their natural ability. So getting them on the course, having a positive experience, and developing on, combining that with a system that also allowed a player who may have started in the U.S. Kids program, has been in a high-level junior before they turn 12, and we're looking to continue that progression and having good opportunities that they were not held back by the, I'm 12, so I must stay at a shorter yardage or otherwise. So giving that ability to progress at your own rate, having the different tiers of tournaments that are based on yardage. So from our classification 4 there in our Discovery series, which is our 9-hole, working to our Future series, playing at that red tee, gold tee yardage, then the prep and the bell as we're starting to get to collegiate preparatory yardage, and ultimately, trying to prepare these girls for the collegiate game and beyond if that's where their dreams take them and their ability. So as we look at that progression and seeing the yardage, so at the national level, which these are all of our multi-day tournaments, you have 36 and 54-hole tournaments that are played across the East Coast and starting into the Midwest now. So you have 3 different divisions that we offer. Some tournaments may have 1, 2, or 3 of these divisions, depending on the event itself. The futures tournaments are going to be somewhere between 52 and 5,400 yards, your prep preview yardage somewhere around 5,700, and your Bell National yardage somewhere north of 6,000, give or take. Some here in the winter, we may be just a little bit shy, but the course is going to play to that yardage here in the winter, as those who just played a wet Mid-South course this weekend know how that length can get long in the winter. But the National Series purpose is about elite competition. It's about collegiate exposure. It's about ranking development. It's about, these are players that are golfers. They see themselves as playing collegiately. They're looking for that platform to develop their skills and show off their ability and build towards that ultimate goal. And that's what that National Series is designed for. In the Regional Series program, these are our developmental tournaments. So these are 18 and 36-hole tournaments. We have them potted around the country right now. We have 8 different regional series that are running up and down the East Coast and in the Midwest. Excited to have our new New Jersey series starting this year. But these tournaments are a little more focused here on the development. So we have our Discovery yardage, again, our 9-hole, our Futures yardage, which is going to be a little shorter, so probably a full red tee, and then our Prep Regional yardage, which is going to be somewhere in that 5,600 yard range. Again, working this progression back and the skill, as the player's skill continues to improve, then they're looking to that next step. The big pieces about the Regional Series, gaining experience, focus on player development. We do use some modified rules. We use double par for the Discovery and Futures series. So, we're not getting mired in the developmental process as we're trying to, have an encouraging environment for these players who are in that earlier stages of the process. Just kind of looking at some specifics there. Class 4, it's about 7% of the membership. You have to be in your 9-year-old year to participate in that. Being that we don't have age divisions, we do have floors on the divisions that are designed both for kind of 2 reasons. One, you have to have a floor somewhere. And 2, there's a social component at play, especially with preteen and teenage girls. So making sure that the environment that they're coming into, especially at the regional level, which may be new to the competitive environment, is also a place where the girls are going to feel comfortable. They're going to feel encouraged. They're going to have some commonality with the person they play with. Those are very important pieces that are going to keep these girls motivated, keep them in the game, keep them seeing themselves as a golfer and wanting to pursue this more. So that's why these floors exist, as we're trying to make sure that the environment fits in all these different segments, not just is the player good enough to be there. That's not the only factor that we're looking at. As we move up to class 3, this is our first division, our first classification for our 18-hole and up play. Players have to be in their 12-year-old year. So that just means you need to be turning 12 by September 30th of the season that we are in. If you turn 12 anywhere in that period, you can go ahead and start playing while you're 11. You don't have to wait for your birthday. You can go ahead and start, but you do have to meet that age requirement to be able to play. You'll find players in this classification 3 are typically ranked 215 to 600 on the PKB Performance Index, which we'll get into, and have a scoring differential around 25. And we're going to talk about what differential means here in a little bit. But that's basically what you're going to shoot compared to the rating, the course par of the day, which is not always 72. That's going to be based on the difficulty of the course, not the par of the course. For a typical futures event, your course rating is probably going to be around 70 on average. So, the average player at class 3 is going to shoot in the 90s is what that's saying. Most, actually over 50% of classification 3 players are in high school. So it's not the young player division. We get that sometimes when players say, I don't want to play with the young players. It's actually 60% high school players that play at the classification 3 level. It just may mean newer players or developing players that are making that progression. So as we move up, our classification 2 program, it's about a quarter of our membership that are in that. Again, it's the same age bracket, same with classification 1. Your scoring requirement is that your differential is under 18. So again, at this level tournament means we're shooting in the 80s in competitive rounds. This is also, these players are going to be ranked somewhere in the 180 to 400 range in the performance index. And on average, a player in the prep series or the Futures National, when you're playing classification 2 tournaments at the national level, the average scoring differential is 12 and a half. So that means those players are shooting in the low 80s in competition from 5,600 yards. That's an average prep player. So that's one thing as you're looking at this kind of development. Again, 3/4 of those players are in the high school age, which is on that progression as we're going. And then, of course, classification 1, this is our highest level of competition that we offer. These players are eligible to play our Bell National and our Prep Preview tournaments at the national level. These are proven, they have a proven scoring record. We have a resume system that players have to go through that to qualify for classification 1. You can't just sign yourself up for that. There's a vetting process and a tour committee that reviews all the resumes as players that are interested in having this status. It's really important process, and we'll go into this when we talk about priority-based entry, is that this guarantees that our highest ranked players, the players who have gone through the pathway, have achieved a lot, they're guaranteed to be in strong fields, which are going to benefit them the same that the developing player wants to be in a field that's going to benefit their development. There's a lot of pieces that go into that. We'll talk about that in the ranking section. But these are players, that are scoring differentials are under 10. On average, a classification 1 player scoring differentials at 5, which means they're breaking 80 from 58 to 6,000 yards on average. So that's what you're seeing at that classification 1 level. And again, about 90% of that division is high school level, and the other 10 are your high level, middle school, younger players that are moving up. And that's one of the unique things about the PKB, again, is that player can go ahead and play in the top division. They're not playing in a younger age division. Get asked a lot about, when should I move up? When's the right time? The big questions to look at there are, do my scores justify a stiffer test and competition from the course, either by difficulty or yardage? So am I outperforming the course that I'm playing week after week? do my finishes justify a stiffer test? So if I'm showing up and winning every tournament I'm playing into, then maybe I'm in the wrong place. Are you long enough to compete at the next yardage? Speaking from reading resumes all these years, every player that plays this tour is really long in the eyes of their parent or whoever fills out their forms. But length is making sure that when you're playing these par fours, especially when you move back to the classification 2 and classification 1 level, is you're talking 360 to 390 par fours. So are you holding a mid to low iron in your hands on these holes? You're not having to hit hybrid into every par four. That means you're long for that division if you're holding wedge or 9-iron. So that's what you're trying to look at as you're considering this moving up. And last, my age justifies an acceleration of the progression because I'm running out of time. This can become a factor to be considered as high school level players who are looking to still play in college. They may not be playing at the high Division I level, but there are a lot of good opportunities at the Division II and Division III level that these players can ultimately be for. So we may, push the progression even if our scores aren't, all the way where we need to be. Kind of a good adage: if you can answer yes to 3 of those 4 questions, then you're probably ready. If you can't, then there's probably still some work to be done before you push off. I'm a big adage of what I say is move up to the middle. Is when you move up, that you're moving in to the middle of the division you're going into. You're not just going to finish in the back of the field by moving up. There's a lot to be gained by being competitive. You don't want to crush your players' spirit and competitiveness when they're just showing up to play and finish in the bottom of a field and they don't feel like there's anything to be gained from the round. So that's a big piece. I always throw this slide in here because this is trust the process. This is the Futures National Final Standings from 2012. And you will notice that the people, Gina Kim and Jennifer Chang, are both LPGA Tour players now. And they did not win the Futures Series when they played. And they played, regularly on that series that year. And Amelia is one of the top amateurs in the world right now. So it doesn't mean if you didn't start the process as the most elite player out there that you're not going to get to your goal. It's, each player is going to develop at their own pace and at their own age. So just keep that in mind. So as I talk about how the PKB is structured, you're talking about trying to pick together your schedule. One of the new things that we did begin to offer last year is a separate track beyond the PKB classification program, and that's our Girls National Championship, which is held on the Golf Channel. That program is different in the way that it is structured. I'm just going to kind of just quickly, it has you qualify locally. The PKB is going to have about 15 different events to try to qualify into these regional finals. Or if you're already a ranked player, you can bypass the local based on your ranking. Then there's 22 regional finals across the country that players will be able to participate in. The winners of those events then qualify for the national championship. It's going to be in November again down at Kashada Resort. And again, it'll be featured in a girls-only telecast on the Golf Channel in early December, which was really cool if you didn't get to see it last year. So that's a great track for players, another opportunity for them to get some great exposure and to play some good tournaments in that process. Kind of looking at scheduling on the PKB side, it's segmented by season. The national schedule runs fall to summer. So we're right now kind of in the middle of our competitive season as we work our way to our tour championship, which is in the second week in August down at Pine Needles, hosted the US Open last year. The fall is where the regional series end. Those run spring to fall. So those are just gearing up. You're probably seeing all of our releases right now. All those schedules are coming out. We've released all the pre-Memorial Day, and now all the summer and fall schedules for the regionals will be released over the next 2 weeks. So keep an eye out for those. The fall season is also highlighted by some of our biggest invitational tournaments. The PKB Invitational, the Tournament of Champions are two of our biggest events, high most profile events. Those are both offered in the fall each year. As we go to the winter, that's a big season for the national program as we work a lot of the collegiate courses on the East Coast. You don't have as many other national, like the USGA, all the big events that you may qualify for in the summer, are not running during this time. So if you're on the eastern part of the United States, or now even across the whole United States, the Peggy Kirk National Series events are some of the best tournaments you can get to in the country, which we'll look at. And those are all through that winter, spring area. Then as you're moving on, you've got in the summer, again, Tour Championship. Those national championship regional finals are mostly there as we're starting to build up towards the fall and the end of the seasons. When you're on our schedule, just a couple quick notes, you can come here at the top and you can search by division. So if you're looking for Bell National events, you can click here. It will show you all of the tournaments just for that division. Or if you're a regional player from North Carolina, for example, you can come and click that series. That's going to show you all the places, all the tournaments that are within your series. So it's kind of a nice way that sorts that on pkbgt.org. As well as there's a nice feature if you click the search by classification. So if you click right here, if you're interested in every tournament that is available, for example, for a classification 2 player, you can search by classification, and it's going to take you to this screen, which will bring you to the ability to search just by classification, which is a real nice tool if you're looking for tournaments for your skill level. For just a quick question I saw there, people asking if this is recorded. It definitely is, because I'm going to go pretty fast, so you can kind of come back through, get the links, all those pieces. So you'll get a replay of this by signing up for this. It'll automatically send it, as well as we're going to post it on YouTube on our webinar feed. As we move through the next piece, we're going to talk about creating the ideal schedule. And there's kind of 3 things that I think you want to try to strike a balance of as far as trying to help your player and do. And that's maximizing resources, creating developmental opportunities, and focusing on advancement of skills. So you've kind of got 3 different pieces to be considered. Resources is a big piece. Golf can get very expensive by the time you start traveling, and entry fees and equipment and all the things that come into missing time from work for the parents and all the logistics that go into travel to get these girls to these events, to play those practice rounds and do that. So making quality choices about where you play and how often you play, is a big piece you want to consider. If you have a budget that you're working under and you're trying to make good choices, you want to make sure you're getting that bang for the buck when you do play and your players in a good, positive environment when they're playing. Developmental opportunities is about where is the player, in this process, what are they getting out of that tournament? Are they learning to compete, expecting to finish in the top 5? Sleeping on a lead? Those are things that you can't create in a practice session. Those have to be felt. They have to be occurred. You have to go through that emotional piece to become, tournament tested, as they say. That's just something that cannot be, faked. And that's again a big piece of why we have the progression that we do, is we want players to stay in an environment where they can be competitively challenged, that they're not just out there showing up, hitting the ball, signing a scorecard and leaving, that there's some goal within that round of an outcome, and learning to deal with that, the expectation that comes with that. It's such a challenging part of the game, is to develop the the mindset to be able to let that technical ability that you're working on with your coach on the tee in practice, let that shine through and perform when the light's on. That's a thing that's just, sometimes is a really tough process to go through. I know parents, it's quite tough to watch from the sidelines, especially when it doesn't go well. I'm very empathetic to you all, as it is a helpless feeling as you're watching your players struggle, which can happen a lot in the game of golf. But it's a big piece for them to learn how to take control of their games, of their emotions while they're playing, and be able to solve these problems as that they incur. And that's a big piece. Another piece of the development opportunities is, how are we trying to qualify for future events? Some of the times you're picking tournaments because you're trying to get to the next thing that presents itself. Within the PKB pathway, that may be to try to get your differential down. So you're proving your ability out there on the course so that you can get to other events. We're going to talk about priority entry next, and we can talk about that. And then focusing on advancements of skills. At the end of the day, it isn't just about driver distance. Again, I'll come back to this. The collegiate game is not a long drive contest. It's golf. And yes, they play long setups. That length and speed are crucially important. But if there's not a game to go with it, then it doesn't matter. So you've got to be focused on developing the complete golfer, and building that athleticism and speed and distance is a big piece of that for sure. But the other pieces are quite crucial as well. And at the end of the day, when you're fretting about the ranking or whether they're going to be in or they're going to get recruited, it all comes down to shooting lower scores. The scores are the thing that the coaches look at the most. It's the part of their resume that they're going to look at and evaluate. It is the key factor. What can you shoot? Can you go low? Can you shoot a score in the 60s, as we're talking about our junior and senior players, those different pieces. It's scoring is the big piece. And then Brandy, as you know, if you've listened to any of her pieces, there's a lot of other factors. Once you start getting compared to other players who are a lot like you in scoring, that's where all the intangibles come in. Your parents, your academics, your behavior, your attitude, all those pieces are what differentiates you from the player that looks like you on paper. But at the end of the day, they don't start looking at you unless your paper resume looks good, and that's based on scores. So big question I get a lot is, how do I get into tournaments? Most of the PKB national program, especially at the Bell national level, are based on priority-based entry, which is going to be based on your scores and the standing most of the time on performance index and other pieces, but there's different things, and we're going to get to that real quick. A lot of the tournaments have wait lists and at-large applications. These are opportunities for you to say, I'm interested in playing this tournament, and you can sign up and do that. So what is priority-based entry? Why does it even exist? So this program was developed for our elite level tournaments to ensure that the top players and these top events have the best fields possible. And we'll get into this here in a second. We're talking about rankings, but creating fields at the highest events that are as strong as possible. That is why priority-based entry exists. If you're not able to get into a priority-based entry event, that may mean that there's a step that you're still in to keep working in the process. That's why we have events almost every weekend at the different levels. So we may, this weekend we have, or back-to-back weekends, we have two of our big priority-based entry events, and then we're following it with the Prep Preview and Futures National event for players that made it and couldn't get into one of these priority events. So you have those different levels in the process. But our priority, we have a proprietary formula that we've developed, which looks at a player's PKB performance index. So everything they've done on our tour, obviously we can see all the data of everything they've done within our program. So we're able to evaluate that effectively. And then we also have a partnership where we're able to pull down Junior Golf Scoreboard data for all players who register. So we're able to go pull your National Junior Golf Scoreboard ranking and your tournament play there to be able to evaluate that. So you don't have to have played the PKB program to try to get into a priority-based entry event. And there isn't a preference necessarily that's going to give you one over the other. It's trying to evaluate a player's resume as best we can. And I'll get to rankings here in a second, and I'll just put a blanket statement that junior golf rankings have a lot of holes in them. It's not like the PGA Tour where the same 150 players play against each other regularly. You know, junior golf, you see different people pretty much all the time. East Coast girls very rarely ever overlap with a West Coast player. It's a very imperfect system that is at least trying to create meaning. I'm going to kind of tell you how it's done and try to give you a way to evaluate it, but do take them a little bit with a grain of salt of they're not perfect and they are not exact in any way. So we're going to look at rankings and ranges, not in numbers. So 2000 and 1900 ranking are the same ranking. They're not exact enough to think the margin of error for the mathematical term is quite high. So just keep that in mind. Just kind of finishing up with priority-based entry. When you're on the PKB schedule, you're going to see events like this that have a line under them. Those are going to tell you those are priority-based entry events. Just keep in mind that they close about 32 days out from the tournament. It's about 4.5 weeks. So you do need to get on the application events for those in advance. When you're registering for one of these events, if you are not an exempt player, some of these tournaments have exemptions that you can already, if you're already ranked, let's say in the top 50 of the PKB Performance Index, you may be able to go ahead and register straight into a tournament. But if you're not, it will allow you to get on the waiting list. There's no fee to get on a waiting list, so it won't charge you for the tournament. If it charges you for the tournament, that means there's a spot available in the tournament. You may not know what division, but you're in. If it doesn't charge you, that means you're on the wait list. Our wait list, there's no obligation to play if you get on a wait list. So when we get to our priority-based entry closing date, we will then establish the field based on the rankings of the players that are in it. We'll select. You'll be sent an email that will invite you to participate. You'll be given a 24 to 48 hour window to claim that spot. If you choose not to, your plans have changed. Otherwise, you just decline. Please write us back. That helps us a lot in the processing. So just a quick email. Sorry, we're not going to be able to play. Please remove us from the list. So you're able to decline that. There's no harm to that. So you can, get on a wait list and see if you get in. That's no problem. It's a waterfall system. So we're going to start with our Bell National field. We're going to fill that field, and then we will review every player eligible for the prep preview field. If once we fill that, then we would review all eligible players for the Futures National field. That's for an event that has all three. So it's always a waterfall down. If you end up in one of those fields and then ultimately get into the higher ranked field because you're on the wait list, so you may, class one player may be in the prep preview field, be the first person on the wait list for the Bell National. A player withdraws, they would get bumped up into the Bell National. So you're not stuck in the field you're in at the time, but you are guaranteed a spot in that regard. So just a key fact about the priority-based entry. So as we transition to rankings and kind of how they work, this is a good piece, and it goes back to, the priority system is how is my player being judged? So you're being looked at. So from the PKB system, we have two ways that players are being evaluated. Our performance index, which is our tour's ranking. So this is every player that plays in PKB tournaments is ranked against every other player ranked in PKB tournaments. We use a weighting system based on the division they play, the scoring differential, which we're going to talk about in a second, the multiplier of the tournament. So championship level events are worth more than classic level events, the size of the field, how many players you've beat. I always talk about your won-loss record, essentially. And you're given a provisional ranking on the performance index until you have 4 official PKB rounds of play. Once you have 4 rounds, then you're given an official PKB index, and then it changes. It's on a 54-week revolving schedule. So it's a 1-year revolving window of time that it's looking at your results. So it's always your last 12 months. So when you play a tournament, it's going to sit on your resume for 12 months. Which is, again, coming back to choosing tournaments. That's a thing that's always to be considered because it's going to be there for 12 months. Secondly, we have our what we call our order of merit programs. These are our standings lists. So these are within each series. So if you're playing the Bell National Series or you're playing the Discovery Series locally in North Carolina, for example, each of those have an order of merit list, which means this is how you stand compared to your peers within that specific division. They do not port across divisions. So prep preview points do not count towards Bell National, or prep South Carolina do not count toward prep Georgia. They're all individual, independent of the series you're playing. Those series count your top 5 finishes, which will add up the points of those top 5 finishes, which will make up your standing. We do have some cool events like Linville Cup at the regional level that our top order of merit performers will qualify for. At the national level, both Bell National and Future National, the top players are those in order of merit are the ones who are going to qualify for Tour Championship. So that's an important piece because there's not a sign up and wait list at-large system for the Tour Championship. That is an earned entry event through order of merit. So what goes into your ranking? So there's 4 factors that pretty much every system out there, whether we're talking about Junior Golf Scoreboard or Golfweek or golf rankings, any of the ones that are out there. And of course, the PKB index is similar as well. CGA, if you're in the Carolinas, there's 4 factors that are being evaluated to give your player a ranking. The first is score. And this is going to be 60 to 67, 70% of your ranking is based on how did you play. And the stat that everybody uses is scoring differential. So it's not scoring average. So scoring differential is the score you had that day minus the course rating. So you've got your course rating, again, is set by the USGA. We post them on every tournament, so you'll see them above the division where the yardage is listed. But again, a Bell National event, for example, the average course rating for a Bell setup is somewhere between 74 and 75, meaning the par for that day on a Bell course is typically 74 or 75. So a scratch player is going to shoot 1 or 2 over par, or 2 or 3 over par at a Bell National event. Your prep preview events are going to be somewhere around 72, 73. Your futures national events somewhere around 71 on average. So what you shot minus that number, that's your scoring differential. That's the 2/3 of your ranking on pretty much every system that exists out there. Then where you finish is going to be the next piece. So how many players did you beat? Again, coming back to that one last record analogy. Bigger fields, stronger fields are going to be weighted more. You're earning points in a lot of these systems. Some systems have different ways they look at it. So that's kind of valuation. But you're going to be 10, 15% of your ranking is going to be based on that factor pretty much across the board. What was the tournament worth? This is a big one. So the strength of field, also weighted against the size of field. So this is higher level events. Different systems have multipliers. So if you see ours, we have different events that say what the multiplier is. If you're in the Carolinas, the CGA just revamped their multiplier system. The Junior Golf Scoreboard has a way that it weights the different events based on who's in them. So strength of field is a calculation that is looked at in determining what your ranking is. Obviously, this one from a recruiting standpoint is a big one. This is the thing the coaches are looking at, is where are the top players playing? How are you doing against your peers from a ranking perspective? So tournament value comes a lot there. And then multiple systems give a little kick to wins. So if you do win, you're given a little extra, a little boost Our index, Junior Golf Scoreboard, different pieces have these little just slight adjustments to give credit for victories. Again, when you're on the PKB index, so this is a shot from current standing, again, you're seeing the different things. So the index is, again, just a calculation that's being done internally that's be able to follow. And then over here to the right, you're able to see the different pieces. Again, scoring differential, again, like I was saying, here are your top players all having negative scoring differentials as they're playing through. Junior Golf Scoreboard, for those that don't know, it's juniorgolfscoreboard.com, JGS, as it's commonly called. This is the main national repository for multi-day tournament results. So the Junior Golf Scoreboard only ranks any multi-day tournament throughout the country that is submitted. Coaches do use this a lot as a good evaluation tool just to see all of your results, because it does post all of those multi-day events in one place. Again, you can see from their system, 65% is scoring differential, 25% is strength of field, and 10% is your top finishes, win pieces. So that's how it is viewing your results. They do have they drop a score or two. So I think it's a 90% rule. So they don't count as far as in your scoring diff. It's not every single round. So it shaves off the edges to try to get a look at your central scores. So do keep that in mind. You will notice that your scoring differential on Junior Golf Scoreboard is going to be lower than your scoring differential on PKB. And that's the reason why we don't have a drop like they use. And if you're on Junior Golf Scoreboard, it is a paid service if you want to see everybody, but you can see your own kid without having to join. But if you do, if you click their events, that's what's going to pop up this screen that's going to show you all the individuals. It'll also show you what yardage you played and where you finished. It's a nice tool. It's, again, something we use a lot to be able to help evaluate players new to the PKB program. One of the things I will say, again, coming back to the overall rankings, and I've had parents fret about, I moved, I went down 10 spots, or the margin of error on this ranking is quite high, especially as you get to the higher rankings. It also has a very big bias towards our Northeastern players and our players that live in less populated areas who do not get a chance to play in top fields as often as maybe the players in and around the academies in Florida and California, or now in the Carolinas, thanks to the growth of the PKB and the Mid-Atlantic through the PKB program. So again, 1,900 and 2,000 on this ranking system is the same thing. 1,000 and 900 are pretty much the same thing. I could put those two players on a tee box, you watch them play 18 holes, and you couldn't tell me which one was ranked 900 and which one was ranked 1,000. So please keep that in mind when looking at how you move week to week and day to day, because that process, it runs every day. So you may change daily. The thing to look at is segments, 1,500 from 1,000. Okay, those are jumps. Those are different segments. 1,000 to 500. Those are segments that you're making these big leaps where you're moving into a different classification of player. So just remember that margin of error is there when you're taking this evaluation. So one of the things we do here at the PKB is we keep a lot of data about strength of field tournaments. So JGS, using that data, so every player that plays on the PKB, when they play in a tournament, we pull all that data so we can evaluate the strengths of these tournaments. This is the big difference that what the PKB program has ultimately provided to the girls that participate is that you're able to get consistently strong and deep fields through our national system. So for example, I broke this out by the different classifications so you can see. So at the Bell National level, and I took the average player ranking. So this is the JGS player rankings of every player in the field. And I used the top 30 players. And you'll see in the next slide, that is the average field size of a high-end junior girls tournament. So 30 players is about, for an elite level tournament for girls, that's the average field size. So I compared every tournament that we have data on by the top 30 players within that field, and then averaged out that number. So it's not just looking at whether there were a couple good players in the field, it's looking at depth. So, and again, from a coach's perspective, that's what they're looking at. Are you competing against talent like you're going to play against when you move to the next level? Are there multiple people in a field that can beat you, that you're not just out there doing, winning by 20. So the Bell National Division has spread. So you're going to see some variance. There's different tournaments throughout the year that have different value. Your championship level, your priority-based entries are going to be those higher average fields. Your sign up and play ones maybe towards the bottom. So again, you're going to see some variance. Again, you'll see with the prep preview, you're going to have some events that are still pretty highly ranked events. These are the prep preview doesn't mean that you're, a lower player. It's just, again, you're on this pathway. But a lot of those championship level prep preview events or the priority based entry prep preview events are still very strong compared to other events in the country. So over to the right, I put just some recent outside examples. These are from 2022, just so you could kind of get an understanding of these are what these events look like. I've got a couple slides talking about AJGA here in a second, but the preview series for AJGA, this was the event in Pennsylvania. That looks like your prep preview events, or there's not a ton of difference in the quality and depth of those fields. That's what they are. For those that play the Jimmy Anderson, they get to the high level, then, Dustin Johnson, that event's one of the top 10 events in the country for girls. It's there's some really good independent events that exist. But understanding, as you're working your way down this system, and again, the boys tournaments with the girls field, co-ed national events that you'll hear, and, that they can get named very fun things to make them sound very strong. But the data says, here are the different pieces that kind of goes into it. A good indicator, if you're trying to understand a tournament's values, go look at the previous year. What were the scores? How many players were there? Did you recognize any names? What yardage did they play? If you're seeing tournaments being advertised as elite and strong, and they're playing 5,500 yards for girls, it's not. Collegiate yardage now at the high level is 63 to 6,500 yards. So if you're not competing at 6,000 yards or more in your junior career, you're not preparing yourself to play at the elite level in college. Now, as you get to the Division II and Division III level, those do get a little shorter. They may play 58 to 6,200 yards, so that jump wouldn't be as high. But that's one of the things that kind of gets into that preparation as you're looking for preparing for the next level is, continuing to push back, playing that collegiate preparatory 5,700 plus yards to be able to get ready for that jump. This other things is kind of how do you compare different tours and different pieces. So this data right here comes from from Golfweek's performance ranking. There's a link there. You can go look at it. This one's available to anybody to pull. Again, this ranking system has flaws. It uses what's an average strength of field. So larger fields are really penalized in this system because it's averaging everybody that plays in the field. It's not taking a snapshot at the top players. But it is, again, it's a metric. Also, Golfweek only self-selects which events it puts in the system. As you can see here, this is not an exhaustive view of junior golf. It has, it looks at past historically strong tours and tournaments and brings them into their system. But being that it is not all inclusive, it does, again, it's just a snapshot and it's just an evaluation tool. But using it and looking at the data, you can kind of see how the different level tournaments that are out there at the national level are compared. So I split AJGA up into different segments because they have, it's 100 plus tournaments within their program, but they're very different tiers. Their invitationals being the best tournaments in the country. These pull from across the country, across the world, that come into play in these events. Of course, US girls, PGA girls, they're at the top. And then your opens. And then there's PKB. So this is our championship level bell events. This is our highest level classic events like the Orange Whip that's going to play this weekend, the Catherine Perry next month, and then our championship events, Rocket Tour, Masters, Open. That's what you're seeing here within the PKB averages. So one of the other things you'll notice too is PKB field sizes are larger on average than most of the other groups. That's the advantage of having this many girls that are playing in one place, is you get that power, again, that depth of field that comes from having a lot of players to pull from. So here you can see how the different tours rank up, and these are their top events of those tours. So obviously they've chosen the 12 best PKB events, and for these other tours, the 2 good tours out of Texas, and then the other tours that play at a national level there below. So there's different strengths. So when you look at the investment, I come back to resources from the earlier comment. If you're going to go pay $300, $400 entry fee to play in some of these tournaments, you want to make sure you're getting the value for that dollar. And a lot of these tournaments don't provide that, especially for girls. One of the key things you've got to remember is just it may be a really good tournament for boys, but the girls' field may be small or weak. So it's not a one size fits all. This is a good tournament. It takes a little bit more research, especially for the girls. But at the end of the day, sometimes you need a place to play. It doesn't mean that, a tour lower on this list is just never to be played. I'm not making this a statement at all. It's just there's an evaluation that you want to make about the value of the dollar. Sometimes you want to play a golf course. Sometimes it's in a qualifier into something else. Sometimes you just need some rounds. So those make sense. But this is what the data is saying as far as what the strengths are of the different tiers of junior tournaments that are out there. One thing this doesn't show is it doesn't show the California tours, which there's a couple really good ones, Toyota, if you're out there. It also doesn't have the independent events listed as a bunch. It does, if you look at the link that's there, you'll see the independent events. So again, I mentioned Dustin Johnson earlier. It's a great event. These, at this level, this is just looking at national level events. Going back to the couple slides before would have been, your regional and your more, 2-day events. So this golf week is just highlighting the highest level tournaments that are out there. Do get a lot of questions about the AJGA program. Just a couple pieces. This was taken straight from their website. It is their performance-based entry system is there to help evaluate who gets into their tournaments. They have 2 main statuses, fully exempt or the number of stars you have. It can get costly and time consuming to try to acquire stars. One of the nice things about the growth of the PKB program is that you don't have to chase stars unless it's a priority for you. You can get high level competition, as we just showed on the last slide, without having to do it. But again, if you have an elite level player that's looking for national level competition, we're back to those 4 questions you're asking of, do I need to make these next steps? If you're answering 3 or 4 of these, yes, then okay, maybe this is the right path for you. But it doesn't mean it's the path for every player. And to be honest, it's only a path for a small percentage of players. That this ultimately is a key factor in getting to their goal of collegiate golf or beyond. But it is a real, it is a positive tool. It's a very good program. Stars available through the PKB program. So almost 600 stars were available through our program this past year and in the active stage right now. So from Bell National players, there were 384 stars awarded across 28 Bell National events in the last 12 months. Prep Preview, there were 71 stars in the Prep Series. There were 44 stars in the Future Series, And there was almost 100 stars in our WAGR National Championship Series. So for players that are looking for these opportunities, the PKB is a part of that program. We make sure that we have this availability for players that are looking for those. And there are, a lot of options. There's not many other places where they have this much access to the PBE system. But there's some data. When you're on a PKB tournament, if you scroll down in the information section, we list ahead of time how many PBE stars there are. Just keep in mind that those are awarded about 2 months in advance of the tournament. So we are not supposed to post, and nor is any other organization supposed to post any statement about stars awarded until they actually are. And again, that doesn't happen until 60 days out from the event. So if you look in a future tournament and you don't see it listed yet, that doesn't mean it's not going to be ranked. It just go look at the previous year, and it's probably going to look something very similar to that, because they base all of their their awards based off of your previous year's field and strength. So that's a very good indication if you're trying to figure out what a tournament's going to be worth. But we will not post what the exact stars until they're officially awarded. So just please keep that in mind. Last, the big thing, and again, I've mentioned college golf multiple times, and Brandy's going to be covering in her webinar coming up here, is this is about providing your daughter a platform to get her to her goal. And for most of the players that play the PKB, that is going to college, having that student athlete experience, hopefully, getting awarded a scholarship or getting to a high-level academic school because of her golfing game. There's been over 1,500 girls that have come through the PKB that went on to play collegiate golf. We're really proud of that, to be able to have that platform for the girls. And Brandy, if you haven't been to any of her webinars, is such a valuable resource to talk. Right now, there's over 275 schools, collegiate programs that have had a PKB alum on them. So that's something pretty cool. Final thoughts as I wrap up this webinar, and then we'll do a couple questions. When you want to focus on maximizing value for your daughter and how the PKB provides that process, first, it's girls only. All the decisions we make, the pins we set up, the tees we use, the everything we do is just, there's only one thought we have, which is, how does this benefit the girls? We don't have to care about the boys and the way they play and the spin they hit with their wedges and the tucking pins that are required to make them challenged. That's never a consideration we have to go through, especially at the elite level events, which is a big advantage in the way we can challenge and set up the girls in a fair manner. There's the national exposure, now adding the Golf Channel event through our national championship, as well as the proven history that we have of developing players through this pathway. Ranking development, again, that depth of field, as we talked about in the rankings piece, is such a big advantage that you get through the pathway. And last, the fact that you can advance through this pathway at your own pace in a year-round environment gives you, the family, the flexibility to, one, not feel rushed in the process, hopefully, but also have confidence that sticking to this plan and getting a part of it is going to ultimately get your player to the goals they have. Having done this 16 plus years now, I've seen how positive of an impact this system has and how it works. And, I'm always available if you have questions about where your player is, because I'm going to bet I have seen a player just like yours in the years past and can give you some context to help you in the process, and I'm happy to do it. So I'm going to stop there. The chat box is there. If you do have any questions of any things that you want me to just quick hit on, I'll be glad to do it real fast. And then just have one thing here at the end. So I'm going to hit these chats here. Consider state amateur events and state PGA versus these national tours. So the amateur events are huge stepping stone pieces. So I didn't talk about WAGR today, but that especially for your high level players. So if you have an elite level junior player, WAGR is going to start, and that's the World Amateur Golf Rankings, is going to become, when you become a junior senior in high school, that's going to become the thing you should care about. The junior rankings should be nothing to you once you get to that part. You should start trying to develop a World Amateur Golf Ranking, and that is those 3-day events, both at the junior level and at the amateur level. You're going to want to start prioritizing those to start developing that because that's going to be the platform you're judged on after you leave the junior ranks. So it's becoming more and more a part of the recruiting process, especially at the highest levels. Again, we're talking about the 5% at the top of the list here. We're not talking about everybody else. But it is definitely a thing that is becoming more important for the elite level player. How important is high school golf in order to play college golf? The biggest thing you want to remember is college golf is a team sport that your player is going to play as individually. High school golf is going to provide that atmosphere of working in a team within an individualized sport. That is a very invaluable tool to help the player develop those other skills besides getting the golf ball in the hole. I've been part of a lot of coaches panels, and you hear that a lot, that they like the fact that players play in a team sport atmosphere because they develop the other skills that's going to make them a good teammate and a good part of the college roster and a well-rounded individual that they can bring into their program. So yes, it does provide some scheduling challenges. Sometimes we on the PKB try to build our schedules to not conflict with the major high school events within the different regions, especially your regional and state championships. But it is a scheduling challenge. Will we ever make a bigger presence in the West? We're trying. Our national championship program has brought us out to a more national platform as far as the scheduling of events, and we are working with great partners with the LPGA and the LPGA Foundation, and are continuing to explore to have more tournaments in more areas. So again, we're a nonprofit foundation, so a lot of what we're able to do is based off of resources. So we're out there, trying to raise funds and get support that helps us to grow this in more areas. The program works and it is a great opportunity. So we would love to be able to bring it to more areas as resources allow. About event selection, yes, some players don't play in the off season, whether it's going to be cold. We had a lot of players playing in cold weather. That's why it's really important. And I will make this note about setups of golf courses. It is the tour's responsibility to set the golf course up to play to the course rating. We do our best to do that. So if it's going to be 35 degrees, you may see a couple tee boxes forward. The ball's not going to carry as far on a 40-degree day as it is on an 80-degree day. We understand that. We're going to try to set up the golf course so it plays like it should play, as best we can. That is in our responsibility. Now, when the wind gets up and the other pieces, it is what it is, right? You can't stop that from happening. One thing you will know, Junior Golf Scoreboard has put in a evaluation, just like the USGA did with course handicap. With individual handicap, where it looks at the results of a day and evaluates whether the scores were inflated either way, positively or negatively, from the expected outcome. And if they see that, they will adjust. This is a thing we do as well as a tour. So we enter every tournament at the national level with data that tells us what the expected score of each division is. And we're trying to hit that score with how we set the golf course up. So if we miss the first day, you may see some adjustments the second day to try to get it. Again, we're trying to make these tournaments be fair to the players who are playing year round in some cases. You're not in Florida on perfect grass. We're playing on dormant Bermuda if you're here in the Carolinas or the Mid-Atlantic or pieces. So those are the things that are being calculated on our end to try to make the tournaments play fair and equitable as best as possible. Yeah, so that just, I think I touched on that there with the rankings as far as, is it an advantage? The college golf season started this weekend, so all the colleges are playing right now. So if you think you can never play golf in adverse conditions and that's going to prepare you to be an elite level college player, then, good luck. The coaches understand when they see a score in January or February what they're looking at. Their profession, their job is evaluating talent. They understand what tournaments are, what the conditions are, what the grasses are. They probably know the grasses of the greens that you played on. Don't underestimate how much effort they put into the evaluation process, because how good of player they are able to bring to their program is what allows them to get raises, to get promotions, to move to the higher programs, which is how they get compensated heavily. So it is not a process where one bad round is going to change something, or that they don't get the nuance of what's going on. Or maybe you had a withdrawal that happened because you got injured. If you have multiple withdrawals on your resume, that's a red flag. But things happen. You have emergencies. You have injuries. You want to be able to have a good explanation, and you don't want to hide from them. You have bad tournaments. You have bad tournament rounds. Brandy talks about this a lot, but lean into those. Tell them why and what you did to make sure it didn't happen again. Or I shot 90 the first day, but I shot 73 the second. Those are the things that a coach is going to ultimately be impressed by. It's not the fact that, oh my God, you shot a bad score, I can't recruit this player. Like, that's golf. So it's about, they say it's always how you respond to adversity. So just keep that in mind with scheduling. The other piece is, you can't play 52 weeks a year. You have to give the player time off. They have to have time to work on things that's not in a competitive environment. Peak performance cannot be repeated 52 times in a year. You just cannot prepare yourself and execute that quickly a cycle. So that's one of the nice things. The regional events, for example, are a great place if you have been working on something and you're trying to go play in an event. Go play a one-day event. It's not going to be ranked. It's not going thing. It gives you a chance to see if you're ready to be tournament tested again. Find those places to go play rounds. Go play, go find a friend and go play, 18 holes together and see if you can beat each other. Things along those lines can have some value in that process. It doesn't have to be done, in the competitive lights on environment 52 times a year. So, looks like that's all our questions there. So I'm going to wrap up the questions there. If you do, again, please feel free to reach out to me, my email, my phone number there, as well as every tour member that participates on the PKB gets a 30-minute free consultation each year with Brandy. If you haven't used that, you definitely want to. She is just a great resource. She has amazing connections within the industry with the collegiate coaches, and you can ask her the questions that you have as far as where your player is, what to do next, what are you maybe missing. She's a great value for that, and it's included in your resume. We also have 2 programs for financial aid. So if you do need assistance, we have a first tournament free program at the regional level, and we have a grant program for players who need assistance on entry fees. So please, we don't want to turn anybody away because of finances. So please take advantage of those. And if you're ever looking for webinars, we have a YouTube channel, or webinars.pkbgt.org. You can see all the old ones we've done. Brandy's one from last week is on there about parents' role in the recruiting process. This webinar will also be posted here in the next couple of days. And then next Wednesday, Brandy is going to be doing Recruit PKB, improving your coach communication. So she's going to be focused on how to communicate with the coaches as you're in the recruiting years. So definitely take advantage of that if you're in that phase. But I appreciate everybody being a part tonight, and we look forward to seeing you guys out on tour. Have a good evening.